I am Femi Okay.
I'm Malika Bilal, and you're in the stream live on Al Jazeera and YouTube.
Today, political unrest and jailing of a popular musician in Uganda.
How will the arrest of Bobi Wine impact Ugandan politics? Join us with your comments and questions.
Through his music and political platform, Uganda's self-described ghetto president, Bobi Wine, has become an outspoken critic of President Yoweri Museveni, who has been in power since 1986. The popular singer-turned-politician was arrested last week, along with at least 30 other opposition members, after Museveni's motorcade was attacked with stones. Soon after came accusations of treason. Now Bobi Wine is being held in a military prison, charged with the illegal possession of firearms and ammunition.
The jailing and alleged mistreatment of the musician by security forces sparked protests and unrest earlier this week in Kampala. Online, the hashtags Free Bobi Wine and Release Bobi Wine are being used to bring attention to this case. Well, since the weekend, one protester was killed and at least 68 have been arrested.
So today we want to learn how the arrest of Bobi Wine and other opposition voices will impact politics in Uganda. With us to talk about this in Kampala, Rosebel Kagumere, a journalist, Andrew Mwenda, the founder of The Independent, that's a newspaper in Kampala, and Grace Natabalo is a social media activist. We also asked a spokesperson from the Ugandan government to join our program, but they declined our offer. But guess it is really good to have you. Malika, where should we start?
Let's start with the president's own words, and that's via Twitter. This is President Museveni, who tweeted moments ago, "I have noted the issue of unprincipled politicians taking advantage of our unemployed youth to lure them into riots and demonstrations. And this is something my government is addressing." This is part of a longer statement that he's released on the official presidential website. But Grace, what do you make of the president's comments there?
Yeah, thank you for having me once again. So I think this is the kind of narrative that the president wants to keep, to make it sound like the young people are not interested at all in the politics and whatever is going on, but they are. They might be unemployed, and that's a fact that many of them are unemployed, but it doesn't mean that they don't care about what's happening in the country, and it doesn't mean that they don't care, that they don't see the police brutality, they don't see what happened to Bobi Wine. So I think it's just a narrative that he's been using for the last several years just to get people to feel guilty for participating in most of these demonstrations. So yeah, I've heard that before, and for me, it just doesn't cut it.
Andrew, I want to show our audience some pictures from Uganda from the last few days. Edwin shares this on Twitter. A photojournalist, a Reuters photojournalist here, covering a story, and you can see what's been happening to him there. He's being beaten. Then we have a member of parliament in hospital after also being beaten. And then there's a picture here. I can't show you the picture, but read, if you want to go to @HE Bobi Wine, then you'll see this story here. Police has shot my driver dead, thinking they shot me. And then you need to scroll down, because I cannot show you that picture on international TV. Andrew, what's going on?
Well, I should provide you context. I think about 4 months ago, the government of Uganda fired its Inspector General of Police, and he will be appearing in its General Court Martial. But I think he had built a large network of civic activists to provide him information in time to be able to contain riots. The new team in the Ugandan police and the military are not used to containing protests, and I think there is a huge gap in the Ugandan security apparatus. That is why you see them acting in such a desperate manner. I should also inform you that the photographer you see being beaten by the army in the streets used to work with me at The Independent, and is a very close friend to me. So this is a very emotional picture that you have shown me.
Yeah, and as a journalist,
so this,
Andrew, as a journalist, when you see that, and when you know that person, do you feel that somehow something's gone wrong in Uganda in the way that the media is even able to tell this story?
Yes, something is awfully wrong. What we are seeing are two things. One, the government has run amok in the sense that the security forces seem to exercise very little restraint compared to the previous times in the way they are trying to contain protests. And two, the government itself is absent because, as you have said at the beginning of this show, there is no government person to defend the government on this show. And even within Uganda, there is nobody on the side of government providing any explanation as to why the army and the police can act with such unprecedented brutality against the population.
You know, when you talk about brutality there, I think that is what a lot of people are noting online, particularly, of course, when it comes to the man we've talked about at the top of the show, and you guys have both mentioned Bobi Wine, who an MP. This is Tony, who tweets, "The detention and torture of Bobi Wine is why we protest. We demand the state to free Bobi Wine such that he accesses proper medication." He's using that hashtag, which has been used several times, 97,000 as of one day. That was on Tuesday, and the number has only gone up. Talking about that, I want to pivot here to a tweet from our own Al Jazeera correspondent. This is Catherine Soy. She says, "We spoke with Edwin Yahweh, Bobi Wine's brother. Says the MP is still in a lot of pain. He has a ruptured kidney, some broken toes and fingers. The family will hold a press conference in the next 20 minutes to update on his condition." Rosebell, the masses that we've seen on the streets, the protests that have come out in support of Bobi Wine, do they surprise you at all?
No, they don't. And unlike Andrew saying this is unprecedented, no, it's not unprecedented. We have had several protests and we have seen brutality on the streets of Kampala. Let's not forget, during the 2011 Walk to Work protests, one of the opposition leaders were almost blinded, and that was including, there were aspects of the security that executed that. And this is not the first time we are seeing such level of brutality. The difference here is the sheer courage that young people are bringing to the streets and willing to go to the streets. And if you notice, the protests were not just in Kampala. They've been sporadic in different parts of the country. It was in Mityana town, and there was today morning in the eastern part of the country. And as Bobi Wine is going to be paraded before the court tomorrow, there's apprehension that more is yet to come. But we have not, it's not new, we have seen this kind of brutality. The difference is maybe the large scale of treatment of journalists, that the military is unafraid to do that, to really beat journalists on camera, and also not only James Akena, but very many journalists. Some journalists were charged with inciting violence for simply being with their microphones and doing live coverage. And consequently, the media is not, the TVs are not giving us live coverage anymore of the events that are happening.
Grace, I see you nodding. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm just agreeing with Rosebell. What we see, it's not new. Every time there is an election, the stakes are high, there is the opposition, then you have the ruling party, and it always ends up in running battles with police. I do not know why our politics is always bloody. I don't know where all this started. I don't know why we can't have just a peaceful election. But so for the last few years, every time we've had an election, there's always running battles between the opposition, the police, the ruling party supporters, and then the opposition. So it's endless, and even just targeting journalists, it's nothing new. So yeah, I agree with Rosebell. None of this is new. It's just maybe this time around there's a new younger face that is Bobi Wine.
Grace and Rosebell, I hear what you're saying. Andrew, I want to give something to you, actually, because I hear what Rosebell and Grace are saying, but there are a few people online, not many in our community, but a few who would disagree with them. This is one person who says, Bobi and his group have been intimidating and assaulting voters during elections. It will restore sanity in Uganda's politics to have him out of the picture. We won't accept intimidation and violence in our politics. Another person answering the question we asked, why do you think Bobi Wine was arrested? This person says, he was inciting youth to stone the president's motorcade, plus illegal possession of a gun, things that his camp has denied. But Andrew, what do you make of these two comments?
Well, I have no evidence whatsoever that Bobi Wine individually was inciting his supporters to throw stones at the presidential motorcade. Neither do I have evidence that he had guns. In fact, I suspect that the guns were planted by security forces in his room. That's my suspicion. But what I can say is that the people who protest against the government in Uganda are not necessarily liberal Democrats seeking a much more tolerant and accommodating government. Remember, these are young people who are angry with the status quo, whatever the reasons, and their protest is an expression of anger, not an expression of their values. But I just wanted to come back to the issue of protest. We should remember that wherever there is a protest, whether it is in Sweden, Norway, the United States, or any country in the world, the police and the protesters will not be kissing and hugging each other on the streets. That is rare. Why I said this is unprecedented, and I'm happy the nearest event Rosebell can quote is 2011, which is 8 years ago, is that I have not seen the Ugandan military and police looking at journalists as targets of their attack. Because in 2011, when they beat the opposition politician called Dr. Chiza Besigye was specifically a target of the attack. That I could understand. But here what I see is arbitrary and restrained attacks on journalists who are covering this event. They are not attacking protesters who are throwing stones at them, who are throwing Molotov cocktails at them. They're attacking journalists holding cameras and who are not even fighting back. I find that unprecedented.
Guess I have to say that Bobi Wine has been a guest on the stream, not once but twice, and we talked about his politics and talked about what it was like as somebody who was just an ordinary Ugandan saying, I want to be part of this political process. It's almost as if One Track Dembe could foresee the kind of trouble that he could get himself into. Dembe means peace. Let's have a little listen to the words of Bobi Wine. I think they're really appropriate for right now.
We not promote no violence. We condemn the violence. Rasta no promote no violence. Give me all.
Andrew, the opposition isn't just about one musician turned politician. There is this rising need for people to say we want something different for Uganda. But Bobi Wine's politics, you don't like them, do you?
No, I don't. I find Bobi Wine individually, but most especially his supporters, I find them intolerant. I find them anti-democratic. I find them uncouth because I have told you before, these are not people who are saying, we want a Uganda where there can be tolerance of divergent ideas, that you can have a conversation and disagree to disagree. For them, if you disagree with them, they will hurl abuses and insults at you. They will use what we call cyberbullying to slander, to lie, to blackmail, to do practically everything. In fact, I worry that people
But that's a small section of the community you're talking to, Andrew.
I should tell you, Grace, I actually interact largely with the Bobi Wine supporters or many opposition activists via my social media platform. And I don't go to everybody's house, but what I see from them scares me as a person who is interested in open and free debate. I'm sure there are many enlightened Ugandans out there who strongly believe that we need to have an environment where we can debate our disagreements in a civic manner and agree to disagree. But the vast majority,
you're trying to use civility to undermine people's anger and to undermine a big section of society that is stuck right now. And you cannot use a civility idea that just because you and I will sit here and talk, that the rest of the country, when you say that every protest in all over the world, there's always some skirmishes, it's not true. In Uganda, I participated in the Women's March in June, on June 30th. For the first time, the police were not engaged with anybody, and we managed to walk peacefully, and we obeyed. But often, we see that the government, whenever the people come to the streets, it's because something has gone awfully wrong, because the government controls who can go to the street, and pretty much nobody. We have the public order management bill. It's like begging for your right to protest. So when you're seeing the people that are supporting Bobi Wine and expressing anger, anger is a very important feeling, and whoever is in charge of this country must listen to the people's anger. So I don't agree with you that just because people are angry, that they are not civil, that they are not willing, if given the space, given their right to protest, that they will not take it up. Because I've seen it on the streets.
Rosebell, I don't mind people.
and,
Rosebell, I don't mind people being angry. What I am saying is when those who are angry indulge in cyberbullying, use lies, slander, intimidation, literally to shut up their opponents, then that is not the type of expression of anger that I would like to see. I would like to see people angry, but agree that we can disagree. Assuming if you can use the only power you have, which is the power of an online platform, to intimidate and threaten your opponents, what if you get into power and now you have control of the state's instruments of coercion and repression, the police and the army? Would you act differently? Because we must be very clear. The fact that you criticize the government, the fact that a person criticizes the government does not make them a liberal Democrat.
I think you're just picking the really a bit of few supporters. You have done this with Kizza Besigye. You tend to say that every supporter, pretty much every opponent that comes up, just people who want to offer alternative facts, want to say these are angry people, you can't trust them with power. Well, the man who is ruling Uganda for 32 years was angry enough when he was young. He took guns. We are not trying to take guns. Ugandans are not trying to take guns. They are looking for a way to express themselves, and that has not been allowed to them. That puts us aside. The fact is that Bobi Wine has managed to get people elected into parliament. So you cannot discredit him as some person on the streets that has no aim. He has managed to rally around supporters and get elected himself.
But
and
Rosebell,
get
I wish you knew.
I hear what you're saying, and Andrew, I hear your point as well. I want to jump in here because I want to bring in our community. Andrew, someone online is hearing what you're saying, and they think that your idea of tolerance, they tweet in, is maintenance of the status quo. So that's one person who disagrees with your viewpoint, but I hear what you are saying. I want to push on just a little bit to this point because a couple of people have raised this. This is Abel on Twitter who says Bobi Wine represents a new wave of revolutionaries that the president thinks can pose a threat to his grip on power, and he gives hope to the youth who have become helpless. That same theme is echoed in this Facebook post. This is McDom who says Bobi Wine's arrest has brought together the social classes that have been suspicious of each other in the past in relation to what needs to be done about Museveni's long stay in power. It's reduced the chances of a class war when Museveni's time ends, and now is a good time for players in the opposition and civil society to get their act together. So, Grace, I want to bring you in here on that. Do you think that the government sees Bobi Wine as a threat, and this is why we're seeing what we're seeing? And in relation to this Facebook comment, has this then brought people together against Museveni?
Yeah, I think Bobi Wine is the new face in the politics, and he's brought a lot of people together because people already liked his music. They love the music. They love the man. And now he's in politics, and they feel he speaks for them. He speaks for the middle class. He speaks because the songs he sings, they touch almost everyone. So I guess the government now sees him as a bit of a threat because he's sort of mobilizing. Even without knowing him, he's busy mobilizing people, just people in the office, on the streets, through the songs, through him campaigning and just, representing our views. So most of us feel like, yeah, this is someone new on the block. So, yeah, the government feels threatened because the more young people Bobi Wine pulls in, the more the ruling government knows that, at some point people will get more involved in politics, and eventually their voice will be heard and they'll go to the streets. They'll probably vote in 2021. So that's why he's causing a bit of a ruckus.
Let me share this with you. This is from the president's Twitter feed. So have a look here on my laptop. I won't start it till you get here. Catch up. Here we go. Let me just press play. And this is the president here saying violence, threats and intimidation in elections will not be tolerated. This is his perspective of that local by-election that Grace was telling us about a little bit earlier. And this is where was the catalyst for a lot of the violence. The comments underneath, fascinating. Let me just stop one here. Steve says, Idi Amin once spoke the way you are speaking now. Idi Amin was a famous dictator in Uganda. Please, sir, don't pick a war with the youths. It won't end well. Andrew, so many young people in Uganda, so many young people who want to be employed. I'm wondering if there's a Bobi Wine effect that's happening right now where the youth are saying, hey, we can be politicians, we can be engaged, we can be involved. Or do you think it's once Bobi has finished his tenure as an MP, then we're done?
Well, I cannot easily predict the future. What I can say is that many youth in Uganda are increasingly educated and urbanized, and this has given them a lot of exposure. Of course, this exposure has also given them very high aspirations. The challenge Uganda is facing is that the rate of growth in their aspirations is faster than the rate at which our economy can create opportunities for them. So the mismatch between their aspirations and the available opportunities is creating social frustration. That is understandable. Every society that has gone through the process of social change, like Uganda, has suffered that. The challenge we face as a country is that how do you manage that transition? It is not true, as Roosevelt says, that because you criticize Museveni, it means you're a better alternative. That's why I disagree with Ugandan elites. You see, Adolf Hitler came to power through democratic elections in Germany, and he was the worst tyrant in the world. That did not make the fact that he criticized the Weimar Republic a better alternative. In Libya, they had a horrible dictator called Gaddafi, and he was opposed by the Misrata Brigade. The people who took over power after him, who were criticizing him, the Misrata Brigade, have created anarchy in that country.
Andrew,
so we must be very careful.
How do you feel that your government is...
Let me finish.
Yes,
so we have opposition politicians in Uganda who are tolerant, who are democratic. They are led by Mugisha Muntu and so many other members of parliament from the opposition. I disagree with the two politicians only, Dr. Chiza Besigye and Bobi Wine, because I think that they mobilize radical extremism that is intolerant to liberal democratic values, and the best they can establish is a tyranny. They are incapable of tolerating their opponents. That's how they behave.
Let me share this headline with you. Museveni, ignore Bobi Wine's injuries, fake news. So what do you make of the way your president right now, his administration, is dealing with this unrest, is dealing with opposition, is dealing with successful opposition?
So I have told you that I disagree. I condemn the behavior of the security forces. I actually even find the president's reaction comical. It should tell you something, that it is only the president out there issuing statements on a daily basis as if the government doesn't have a spokesperson, the army does not have a commander, the police does not have a communications person to respond. So the failures of the government of Uganda are very clear. What I'm saying is that we should be very clear that the fact that you have a bad government in authority, a bad regime in authority, does not necessarily make anyone opposing it an angel. You can have evil opposing evil. If I said Museveni is bad or terrible, I would add that Bobi Wine and his supporters, the experience I have with them is a horrible alternative. I would never want to see them govern our country.
I have a reply here from several people on Twitter, but I'll just read one. Mo says, Dear Andrew Mwenda, we Free Bobi Wine supporters do not appreciate you calling us unruly or cyberbullies. We're trying to speak out against injustice in mostly peaceful protests. The police always come out to brutalize us. How are we to express our dissatisfaction? So several people with that thought. But I want to move on to this point in the last few minutes of our show. Insay on YouTube says, the arrest of Bobi Wine is a watershed moment to Ugandan politics. It's the beginning of the end for Museveni's regime. Grace, in about a minute, would you agree with that?
Well, I think I can't conclusively say that this is the end of Museveni's regime, but I see it as the beginning of something new and a beginning of a conversation, a beginning of, conversation about politics, how the young people see themselves in future. Right now, they see themselves in the eyes of Bobi Wine and they have hope. So it depends on how they, because we have elections in 2021, it's still kind of far away. So it would depend on how the next, how many years is it, 3 years go. But I think it's the beginning of something different and something that's giving people hope. So yeah, I would say this is the beginning of something. I do not know if it's the end of Museveni's rule yet.
Rosebell, Andrew, Grace, thank you so much for being part of this programme. We don't have Bobi Wine in this programme. It would have been nice to have him here and his voice here, but I am able to bring you his voice, his opinion, via his music. So we will end this show with freedom. Thank you, guests. Thank you, community, for being part of this conversation. Milik and I will see you online.
Eggwanga lyonna lyennyamidde bagambe yalinga demokulasi bamubuluka kati yafuuka na hypocrisy bagambe yali fundamental change mwagizaala wakati mugivudde no change bagamba kyensongeza abalwanya kati mwazibukako nammwe mukola biri ebyabali bakusaba nti constitution yaabwe togikwata